Guru Nation, welcome back to another episode of Random Musings from the Clinical Trials Guru. This is an episode I wish I wouldn't have to do, but we're in the middle of a pandemic. Actually, not even in the middle. The United States kind of just getting started. So
We're in the epicenter of it.
we're in the
We're the
epicenter of it right now, right? So
Yeah.
I've got Dr. Sabine Hazan on. I'm interviewing her right now. She's working on all kinds of things, and she's probably most informed person right now to talk to us about this because not only is she a physician, but she's a researcher, a clinical researcher. She owns a site, and then she's also a sponsor with Progenabiome. So, very uniquely positioned person to be interviewing. So, Dr. Hazen, thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate
my,
it.
my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So, what's going on? This is going out. We're recording March 19th, 2020. It's also going to be going out March 19th, 2020, which I don't normally do, but this is timely. So, uh,
Yes.
what's going on in the United States right now?
Well, I think starting December, I started paying attention to what was going on in China, and I think while everybody in America was paying attention to the politics, everybody was really ignoring what was going on in China. And what was going on in China is that a most likely a lab was playing with a virus that they shouldn't have been playing with. And the virus mutated to become this epidemic in China. In China, you started seeing on the news a lot of people didn't have access to healthcare. People started dying really fast. The virus was very aggressive. And so I started looking into, the data and followed this quite closely. When the sequencing of the virus came on, and as you know, I own a genetic sequencing lab that basically does analysis of bacteria and viruses. When the sequence came on of this virus, what was interesting to me is that it was a different virus than we were used to. I mean, it's kind of it's the precursor to the MERS virus that, and the SARS, a similar kind of family, but a different kind of strain. And the interesting thing about this virus to me was the fact that the strain, when it went from China to Italy, was different, which made me worry about, well, is this virus mutating as it's traveling from one country to another?
Hmm.
That was question number one. Question number two is I started seeing some of the data of China, and I realized, wait a minute, people are contaminated. They either, cure themselves from they get an immunity from the virus, or they end up having a relapse. And the relapse was what was interesting to me, because when you have the flu, typically you're done. You're finished with the flu, right? And
Hmm.
and then you go on your merry way. The fact that everywhere there were like these sporadic cases of, a woman in Japan that was thought to be resolved. Her nasal swab was negative, but then she ended up having a relapse and ended up back at home again, made me wonder, is this virus mutating even within the individual? And I'm going to explain the difference, because even it was actually my scientist that kind of, as physicians, we do not understand the genetics of viruses. We count on scientists to do that work, and scientists and doctors on the whole are very separated, right? So you've got the scientist on one hand doing his stuff, and the doctor on the other hand doing their stuff. The scientist comes up with a drug product or an idea, and then has to convince a doctor to apply it clinically, right? And thus the beginning of clinical trials, right?
Right.
So when you have a scientist on one hand that's doing laboratory work and a doctor on the other side, they don't really talk to each other. When that happens, there's a disconnect. The message doesn't get there very fast. So I have the privilege. First of all, I have two privileges. I'm a physician. I'm in the front line seeing patients. My husband's a physician seeing patients. 9 physicians in the family. We're on the front line. The advantage that I have is, as a clinical trial doctor that went the route of wanting to understand bacteria and the microbiome, and not just keep on giving medications and treating with drugs, but just understanding what is it in our gut flora that's basically changing that causes the disease or that causes the virus to be fine in young people versus old people, right?
Right.
And so when that happened, that's when I opened Progenabiome. When Progenabiome was created, I initially sent my work to scientists, but I realized I wasn't getting the value or the data that I was getting, and therefore hired my scientist in my lab. The advantage of having a scientist in your lab as a doctor and being the sponsor kind of thing is that you get to talk to the scientist one-on-one and understand genetics, which most doctors, definitely the politicians, do not understand viruses. So I'm going to explain to you what was explained to me, which makes total sense. So bacteria is a double-stranded, bacteria is an organism, right? That's double-stranded DNA. DNA is basically two strands that are like one next to the other. And if they reproduce and they have a mutation, there's a thing called a polymerase that goes in there, washes the mutation, and then the next, bacteria that gets created or the next cell, etc., the double-stranded DNA, our DNA, has the ability to correct those mutations, okay? However, viruses are RNA. That's a single-strand organism. That means when it mutates, it doesn't have that polymerase that removes the mutation. That means when it mutates with it. When it replicates, it mutates. If it replicates with a mutation, then the mutation comes back as a new virus. So I'm going to explain that in English. If I have a strand of RNA that is ABC, right? And now I've given my strain of RNA that is ABC, and now I'm giving it to another patient. But the other patient, when it gets to his body, the strand becomes CDE, right? So now it's a completely different strand, right? Same kind of virus, but a different strain and a different mutation, right? So when you have that and you want to try to find a vaccine, it's very difficult to match when there's a variation in the mutation. When we create these vaccines, we create it to be ABC with ABC. We find the match of ABC, bang, we put it in the organ. We put that little ABC vaccine into the human, and you should be fine. When one patient has ABC and the other one has a variant of ABC, which is ABC with a little defect in one of the strands, right? Then it's difficult to match the vaccines. What was really early on in my looking at all this, as you know, I don't do clinical trials to be with pharmaceutical companies. I do clinical trials to be on the cutting edge of medicine, right? Because it's at times like this that I need to know what are the protocols. When China was starting to do all this, I basically looked at the data and realized, and I went to clinicaltrials.gov because clinicaltrials.gov has access to all the trials all over the world. And I noticed in China, there were a lot of vaccine experiments or trials that came and it says on clinicaltrial.gov, withdrawn. So that told me, and then you saw also in the United States, companies started doing vaccine protocols, and then the trial was withdrawn. When I noticed that, which is very peculiar for a trial, for a disease, right? I mean, it's very peculiar to have a lot of withdrawn trials, right? What does it tell me? What did it tell me? It told me that people are struggling to get a protocol out there, and they get the protocol out, and the protocol doesn't work. So therefore, it's withdrawn. What does that mean? That means the virus is actually smarter than the scientist. The virus is smarter than anyone. This virus, and remember, I've said, you and I have talked about microbes. If we don't start understanding bacteria and its relationship with viruses and parasites, and fungus, we are at a problem in humanity because so many products are coming out with so many bacteria. Food products have so many bacteria. that we're altering our inside ability. Bacteria in our gut is our immunity, right? So I was afraid of this moment when I started Progenabiome, because I was afraid, because I've been seeing so many pharmaceutical companies going into the wrong direction, in my opinion, with certain clinical trials. And I needed to start understanding the microbiome. And that's why Progenabiome was created as a research clinical genetic sequencing laboratory. Progenabiome's purpose is really to understand these bugs, right? Because when we're stuck like this, we need to see, well, what happened exactly? What is the virus looking like? We need to see the virus in people that are surviving. And the bacteria in people that are surviving, and then bacteria in people that are not surviving. When I started doing a lot of research in all this, I started educating myself on what was working in the rest of the world. And of course, came on a bunch of data and a bunch of papers, one from France on the Plaquenil and azathioprine and Z-Pak, essentially, which I think President Trump started mentioning today, that he's making it more available. So
Right.
I knew that was going to be in the pipeline as one of the drugs. However, there's a huge shortage as a physician. So now our community hospital, the administrator didn't really listen to me when I told him this crisis was coming. And I think a lot of people were taking this lightly, because everybody was saying, oh, it's the flu, it's the flu. But I think for those of us that have done clinical trials, that have seen what's out there, and that there was nothing coming as far as trials or therapy, that's when I started panicking. And that's when I started educating myself and calling Italian doctors, calling doctors in China, doctors in India. I had to translate a bunch of documents to kind of understand the clinical trials that were done there. Luckily for social media, a couple of my friends are Italian, so they were able to translate the Italian.
So what did these doctors tell you from overseas?
Well, everybody had the same situation. They're like, this is a disaster. We're scared. We're physicians on the front line. We're not prepared. We were not prepared for this. We have no mask. We have no hazmat suits. We have no ventilator. We're forced to let people die. We don't have a choice. This is a virus that is killing, a certain elderly population. Of course, when you look at the data, you start seeing the elderly population, 61, high-risk population is really in there. But then when you look at the data from China, you start seeing that in China, the population was old, but you don't know how much to trust from China, because I think the numbers are really not telling. I think the real answers are in Italy, what's going on with the death rate. I think the fact that what scared me was, and why I went to my hospital administrator and said, we need to protect the doctors now, it's probably in our community, is because when you look at the data from China, 15% of the medical staff was infected. 15%, that means you're losing 15% of your doctors taking care of patients. The other big disaster is there was a flood. Everybody panicked about having the virus. And so I saw that, and I realized, well, this is what probably killed their healthcare, their patients, is everybody panicked and went to the doctors. Now they're infecting. Imagine you've got 10 people in the ER, and half of them have one strain of a virus, and the other half have another strain of a virus. Now, both strains go on to the doctor, the ER. He's accumulating two strains. There is no way for his body to fight this. People that stay home, when you look at the literature, people that stay home with this virus, and this is what we're telling everybody to stay home, 99% survive. Okay?
If you stay home, how long do you stay home?
Well, you have to stay home until the crisis occurs. So if you look at China, they stayed home for 3 months. If you look at Hong Kong, so now let's look at the planet, right? Because we do clinical trials, and the beauty of research is it's the planet working together. I'm so lucky that I'm in research, because I have colleagues that do clinical trials in China. I have colleagues that do clinical trials in Italy. I have colleagues that do clinical trials in France. So I get to call them and say, what's going on over there? And then I have an insight that nobody has. So that insight I was able to use by connecting the world and kind of seeing what worked in Italy, what didn't work in Italy, what worked in Korea, what didn't work, what's working in Israel. Look at Israel, a country of so many people. They're all isolated, zero mortality. Maybe we should start taking the ways that Israel is doing it so that we reach zero mortality, right?
So,
But
so
the
what are they doing differently than we are? Because here, I mean, we're both in LA area. I'm noticing almost nobody on the road. Like, are we doing a good enough job here in the
we're
United
we're
States?
we're we're doing a good enough job, and I think Hollywood is kind of, I've been on Facebook alarm, kind of ringing the bell and saying, guys, put mask, it's coming, and showing the data and translating in Italy. And I think, luckily I have a lot of influential friends that are in Hollywood, and they kind of pushed the message. And I think that part, the Instagrammers are putting things like, hey, stay home. I would stay. I'm young. I'm going to be immune, but I'm a risk of killing an old person. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
We're doing a good job on that part. And I think now that people are realizing, wow, the hospitals are getting flooded. The doctors are getting flooded. The hospital is not your best part, because the problem is that if you get into the hospital, remember what I said, it's multi-strains. It could be multi-strains. I mean, we don't know yet until we start looking at the genetics of everybody. It's also, the hospital has a lot of other infections, right? A lot
Right.
of, other bacteria that the patients are getting exposed to. So the hospital is not really your best friend. If you look at the data from Italy and China, people that were admitted had a worse prognosis than people that were not admitted. I'll tell you a story that kind of stuck to me from China. And because I'm a GI doctor, obviously, was a Chinese young woman and a nurse. The Chinese, both of them 29 years old, got the virus. The nurse decided to tough it up in a hotel room. Her husband was bringing her soup, and she kind of cleared it on her own. The doctor was admitted, and the doctor was intubated, and the doctor died. So that scared me enough to start telling my friends, you know what? We don't know enough about this virus. Maybe the hospital is not the best place. Maybe the urgent care, maybe your doctor is not the best place. Maybe your doctor is infected without knowing.
Right.
So that's why those are the important things. So shutting down in a clinical trial level, shutting down monitoring visits, monitors that are traveling. I stopped that a long time ago because I knew it was coming. You were coming to my site, and I said, no way, you've been on a plane. I'm not having you expose my staff or my patients.
Right.
These are very challenging times because it's very difficult to get staff that wants to work. It's very difficult. They're scared. They're scared of infecting their parents. So,
Yeah.
these are challenging times for
Did
sure.
you, speaking
So
of the site, so like the monitoring, did you guys create, because all week I've been revising this SOP and the FDA came out with guidance yesterday for sponsors and sites. I don't know if you saw that, you're probably busy on the clinical side, but have you guys revised your SOP or changed your overhead policy yet?
we actually had that. So my SOPs are, me, my SOPs are pretty OCD. Having dealt with
Mm-hmm.
the FDA for so many years, they come to my office for audits, and we've been great. The Our SOPs, we didn't do anything. I don't have time to deal with SOPs. It's already in their crisis situation. We already have the hazmat, we
Okay.
have the goggles, we have the mask. We are prepared. We are prepared on the standing of that. However, patients do come in. We have patients that are doing clinical trials. They are coming to my site one at a time, one patient a day. We are not exposing other patients. We're all wearing hazmats when we see them,
Mm-hmm.
and we protect them because that's my priority, is not to infect anybody. And you never know, my staff may be asymptomatic carriers, right?
And,
So
and
I
so for
think
your patients, that are like for your study patients, are they all withdrawn or are they just on a pause?
so. A lot of them are on a pause, especially that either have traveled or the ones that have been, um, you know, uh, the ones that have traveled, the ones that are like symptomatic for any symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing I want to touch up on is, the symptoms. And first of all, you can be asymptomatic and a carrier. You could have symptoms of cough, shortness of breath, or fever. Those are the most common that are pulmonary. However, you could also have symptoms of the GI tract because the virus stays in your small intestine, your colon. It sits on what's called an ACE receptor that basically is in your bowels, it's in your bladder, it's in your lungs, it's in your testicles, it's in your cecum, your small bowel. So the importance of testing, like for example, if you look at the case of Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson, because they publicized it all over, their symptoms were just malaise. So, those people that have malaise or muscle ache should just call their doctors. Beautiful thing happened is the president got on top of Medicare and everything, and Medicare approved to do teleconference with doctors. So now every patient that is panicking, worried, needs to call their doctor, doesn't need to go to the clinic to expose himself to the doctor or the nurses or the environment. They can just call the doctor, and then the doctor can kind of evaluate whether this is an emergency that needs to go to the emergency room, or whether this is an emergency, this is something that can be handled, later.
That's important. That's important that you said that, because I think the first instinct of most people is, if they're not feeling well, and especially with this hysteria going on, they want to go to the ER. And what you're saying is that might not be the best place to go. So what you're recommending is
urgent care. Your doctor's clinic is not the safest place right now.
Okay.
They're getting bombarded. They're probably infected. They don't even know it. I'll tell you, my little hospital in Ventura, they don't have any tests. The ideal situation is to test every doctor, make sure that they're negative, then put them in a hazmat suit, and then take care of patients, right? That's the ideal situation. However, this hospital doesn't have enough masks, doesn't have enough hazmats, because the administrator didn't, foresee this happening. He thought it was just the flu and it wasn't a big deal. So the key thing is basically test the people that are exposed to the patients, make sure that they're fine, because you don't want them crashing, and then who's taking care of the patient? So the people that are going into the hospital and working need to be made sure that they're fine. I'm actually working on a protocol right now to do a prophylactic drug for the doctors on the front line, et cetera, that I'm going to try to pass through the FDA right away. And then I'm doing also a treatment plan. I have 2 treatment plans of different people that have given me ideas that we're also trying to pass through the FDA as well. Once I have those, I'm just going to shoot them to all the doctors to kind of know what's going on. This is not your typical clinical trial. This is going to be a clinical trial where doctors are going to be on the front line as the investigator with whatever they can do. And I'm sure the FDA is going to give us lenience on this, because this is an emergency. So in other words, if I have a protocol that comes out and it's approved by the FDA and they think it's fine, then I can pass it to all my doctors, as long as I collect, who are the doctors that are on the protocol. And then we can start having doctors on the front line having prophylactic medications and being protected and being tested. I'm also working with a company to do that originally was going to do home testing, but actually I convinced them that that was a bad idea, because I said, once you put it in the mail, then what happens is the postman now gets infected. Now the rest of the mail is infected. It's not a good idea.
If they put it in a plastic, and so the virus can go through that stuff to the cardboard?
It's not that. It's basically, let's say you put it in the tube, and you put the tube in an envelope, right? And you're coughing on the envelope, right? And then you go to the post office.
Or you lick the envelope. Yeah.
Or you lick the envelope. Now the envelope is contaminated with a virus that can last up to, and I forget the numbers, forgive me, I've read so much stuff right now, but, on metals, the virus can last up to 3 days. So on cardboard, I think it's like 6 hours or 9 hours. But, by the time it goes into the box, somebody touched it. I was very impressed with FedEx today. The gentleman dropped off my envelope, and he basically was 5 feet away from me. He put it on the front. I mean, these are the precautions people need to take.
Yeah.
It was a young man, so I'm sure he's going to be fine. But if you're an elderly, high risk, immunosuppressed, FedEx or postal service, probably not a good time right now to do this job.
That's actually a
So,
good question. So, like, I still check my mail every day. I don't wear gloves. Am I supposed to be wearing gloves when I go get the mail?
well, you should wear gloves, and then the other thing is wash your hands with soap and water right away.
Immediately after,
The
yeah.
so the reason that we've been telling everyone to wash their hands is because the soap actually breaks the membrane of the virus. So when you wash for, like, happy birthday, sing the song "Happy Birthday to Me" or "Happy Birthday to You." When you wash your hands, you basically kill off the virus right away. So, washing hands, being vigilant. I'll tell you, my husband went to the grocery store yesterday and he felt that the guy that gave him his groceries was infected. So, he brought all the groceries home. He changed his clothes, took a warm shower, and I took gloves on and I protected myself and basically bleached. I took water and a little cup of bleach in warm water, and I just cleaned up all my packages, like my milk bottle I cleaned up, and so these are the things. Vegetables, if you're buying vegetables or fruits, not a bad idea to take a bowl of warm water and vinegar and put it in, and put your fruits and vegetables in warm water. So those are the things that people need to know. The other thing is, obviously protecting your immunity. So calming down your system. If you're anxious, it's not going to help you because you're killing off all your good bacteria that's helping you to fight this virus. So do a meditation class, do a yoga class, breathe, exercise at home,
Exercise, yep.
paint. My daughter took up painting because she's bored at home by herself. And these are good methods to kind of decrease your stress, build up your immunity from inside to fight this virus.
So,
Play games with your spouse, watch a Disney movie, breathe, all that. So you don't need to rush to the ER and freak out. So
right.
those are the things, that you should do. If you can do these things and it calms your system and you're not short of breath and you're not coughing, etc., great. The other things to remember is certain medications make patients worse, NSAIDs. So if you're taking massive amounts of NSAIDs for your back pain, probably not a good idea, because if you get infected with the virus, you're now killing off the good bacteria again, probably killed off from the NSAIDs. It's the perfect storm. It's like a lot of
Interesting.
NSAIDs, a lot of acid dumping, a lot of stress, kills off bacteria, and then the virus penetrates, and it's the
So no
perfect host.
ibuprofen. Ibuprofen's a bad idea.
Bad idea. You could take one or two, obviously, if you've got like something, but in general, avoid, all these drugs. Proton pump inhibitor, antacids, all those things. Yes, people are stressed up at this time, but not a good idea to take them, in my opinion, because I think they 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 allow the virus to potentially go into your small bowel. I don't think they
Hmm.
protect. But again, this is just me thinking hypothesis. It's a hypothesis. Everything. I think you and I have been doing research too long, and definitely me way more than you. Where that research is, one day this, and then the next day it changes because some new information just
Right.
changed the research. So whatever I say today may be wrong tomorrow, but right now, this is what we know. This is what we've seen from the data written. That's why it's so important to have data written, data reviewed by doctors, data reviewed by other people, and not just say, hey, this medication is approved. I have so many people, and because I'm in the clinical trial business, so many people have given me these alternative therapies, right? But the problem with alternative therapies is there's no clinical trial on it. How am I going to trust this? If I have a choice between a drug that's shown in Paris and Italy to have cured my patient, am I going to give my patient that drug, or am I going to do an investigative drug that's never been tested and I only have the hearsay of the scientist who wants to
Right.
sell the drug?
What do
Same
you?
thing with probiotics, by the way.
What is your?
Probiotics. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I was gonna say, what is your gut feeling? No pun intended on that, but your gut feeling on the malaria drugs that Trump and the FBI Commissioner Han were talking about this morning. What do you think about this? Is this promising?
Very promising. Very promising. The big problem with that drug is there's a shortage of it.
Hmm.
So really I know, because I got a lot of patients today calling me, oh, can you write me a prescription for Plaquenil?
Everybody wants that.
Yeah, and I said, no, stay home. If you stay home, you're going to be fine. You don't need it. And listen, every drug has side effects, right? How do we know you're not allergic to that drug? Then you're going to end up with an allergic reaction at the hospital, right? The simplest thing is to stay home. Now, the people in the hospital need that drug. The people that are admitted, immunosuppressed, the elderly. Remember, the population that is affected by this is over 60. The average is 62 years old. That's the population that's affected. So if I have a patient that has cardiac disease or hypertension, even hypertension is a high risk, by the way. And I'm going to go over some of the high risk: liver failure, kidney failure, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, HIV, cancer patients, immunosuppressed, cardiac patients, pulmonary patients, asthmatics, COPD. Let me think. Inflammatory disease, that are taking NSAIDs, not a good idea. Patients on multiple medications. Also, frankly, patients that take so many, vitamins that have not been tested, so many probiotics that have not been tested. Those potentially could be a risk. Healthcare workers that are exposed to the virus, healthcare practitioners, nurses, staff, home nurses, physical therapists, all these need to be gowned up and protected because they're at risk. I think when you look at the mortality of Italy, which really was what scared me and started going wild on Facebook, was basically 3% of the doctors are dying from this, almost as much as 3% that are immunosuppressed and high-risk population. So, these are the things that we need to be alert and aware of. I think testing patients is not a good idea. Testing patients by mail is definitely not a good idea. Testing patients where, yes, you have a nose swab, you do it at home, and then you put it in a box, in a little tube, and then the tube gets put in a container where a person comes and gets it from Quest or LabCorp or other labs with a hazmat suit, like we're going to do with Progenabiome, because we're going to be testing the stools as soon as we're ready. And as soon as our machine is validated and everything. I never want to tell anybody they have something and not be 100% sure. The tests that are out there right now, the false negative is 30%. So you may have the virus and you were told you're negative. So now you're thinking, okay, well, I'm fine. I'm okay. I'm going to go outside, and you're getting double infection. You know what I mean? The problem is that you can't really trust that. I think as much as it's an important thing to test people on the front line that are seeing these patients, the high-risk population to be tested, we need a lot more tests, but it needs to be done by professionals that are wearing hazmats or dropped off in a box that, nobody can access and that the hazmat people kind of get to. And I mean, this is me thinking out loud.
What
but
about
basically,
these drive-through? I saw your comment on a LinkedIn post today about a Walgreens drive-through.
That's a mistake. They're not equipped. They don't know how to do the swab properly. And it's infecting them. They're at risk.
Yeah, and they were showing somebody on the news today. Me and my wife were watching the news, and one of the local hospitals here is doing a drive-through testing. So what they're doing, they're going to them with gloves. They're doing the little throat swab, and then they're walking that to a box, and they're coming back to the next car with the same gloves on.
Right.
The same gloves, and I'm thinking to myself,
same gloves,
yeah,
same gown.
I'm not
so
a
now
doctor,
you
but
weren't
this
infected.
can't be.
Yeah, so
Imagine.
now you're not infected, but now you're getting infected, right?
Right.
Because
right.
So it's best to stay home to let this thing go out. I know everybody's anxious. Everybody told me, oh my God, but I need money and I'm struggling, etc. And I can't fix all these problems. Obviously, as a doctor, we have to fix the front line and make sure that our front line is solid. Because if we lose our doctors, who's going to intubate? That community hospital has 4 pulmonologists. If 3 of them are infected, who's going to do the intubation for these patients? So we cannot overflood our medical system. There's a lot of companies out there that are trying to make money and selling these kits, saying, oh, get tested at home kit for stools and home kit for nose and this and that. They're not validated. the Department of Health, remember, is super slammed. They don't have time to keep track of these people and what they're doing.
Will they keep track later though? Like when they're not
Well,
slammed and
yeah,
go
but
find
then
all these
they're
people?
yeah, but then the problem is now they've infected because it's gone through the mail.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Well, those
so
companies that do that, I mean, that's criminal behavior. Uh,
criminal, criminal. I
yeah.
mean, the same thing, this is a time where, listen, I wrote 3 protocols, one to analyze stools, to understand what's in the stools, another one as a prophylaxis, and another one as a treatment. Normally I charge pharmaceutical companies a lot of money for these things because it's my time, right? I'm not charging anything. This is my time that I'm just struggling to do the data and write those protocols. My IRB, New England IRB, is not charging me anything. My lawyer that reviews these protocols as well is not charging me anything because, I got to protect the doctors, right? So we
Mm-hmm.
need a lawyer to overlook all that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these are the people that are like the gems, the angels, the people that kind of step forward and say, I'm here to help. What can I do? Don't worry about the money. We need, laboratory. Roche has given out a ton of medications for free for investigator-initiated trials. A lot of people are saying, oh my God, pharmaceutical companies are making a lot of money. Right now, they're spending a lot of money just to get people well and to get the economy back
Right,
in order.
right.
So, and all the power to them because they're taking the risks. These clinical trial companies and doctors that are in there doing clinical trials and that are going to bring these patients to treat are taking the risk. It's not as simple as staying home. So for all the people that are, concerned about finances and everything, I have to say, listen, I mean, you could volunteer at the hospital and put a gown, but you're very lucky that you're home and you're alive. So take a deep breath and don't worry so much. Reinvent yourself. Find something online. I've seen, there was a meditation, a lady that does meditation, and she had to pay a ton of money on her rent. And she retransformed herself and said, you know what, I'm going to go live. And so now her whole meditation is live.
That's smart.
A physical trainer was at the gym, and, he's a father of 2 little kids. And he was, oh my God, I'm losing my job because people are not coming to the gym. He started his, training online. Look at all these kids. They figured it out.
You got
The
to innovate.
millennials.
Online
You got to
academies.
innovate.
I
The
tell you
kid.
what, Dr. Hazan, my CRA Academy and CRC Academy, which is mostly online, have gotten so much interest since this has started. I mean, it's unbelievable. People are looking for things to learn while they're sitting at home. So
Yeah,
there's
and
opportunities there.
for research, monitors can easily do the monitoring from abroad, right? You could be at
Right.
home and I could email you all the stuff through a secure fax or a
Yep.
secure email, and then you get everything. You
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily need to go to outside. Deliveries, Amazon, if they set up a system where the people are protected and they put it in the mailbox and the mailbox is delivered protected to the patient at home. There's so many things that companies can, do. And, construction workers, well, if they need to work, maybe, protect themselves. But, there's so many ways that companies can just think outside the box and find
So
solutions.
you be Nostradamus, and thank you for this. We're gonna wrap up now. You're Nostradamus. You put on your Nostradamus hat. How does this end in the United States, do you think? Like when do we
It,
start going back to work like normal?
okay, so if you look at Hong Kong, and I was saying from looking at China and then looking at Hong Kong, I called my contacts in Hong Kong and I said, how did it go with the coronavirus? I hear you guys are back into work. They're like, well, December we found out China was infected. Hong Kong took the stand of putting everybody at home for 3 months straight. They were closed from December to March 1st, and they went back to work on March 1st, and now they're fine. Mortality rate, 50. Israel is still in that 3 months zone where, you got to treat. Why 3 months? Because the virus could be in your system for up to 30 days. Remember, it lives in the small bowel. So until we have a stool test, which is what we're working on, to make sure that the virus is gone from your stools, and that's going to take at least 2 to 3 weeks to get that, going, but seeing with patients and symptoms, etc. If we clear off everybody and everybody is clean and everybody's on Plaquenil or azathioprine that are sick and diseased, we should be fine. We should be back at work in no time. Okay. If we continue to have people going out, we'll never finish. And so I think the sooner people buckle down and say, you know what, I'm going to be fine for a month at home. And I tell this to everybody, and this is the important message. If you are home, you have 99% chance of staying alive. Why wouldn't you want to take that? 99% chance of staying alive if you're home. So if people are home, they're fine. If we can mobilize a lot of people, they're fine. The treatment from Mr. Trump is going to arrive. Doctors are going to start doing prophylaxis. Doctors are going to start treating. 3 months, I predict we're back at work.
So March, April, May. So like June, early June?
Probably, I'm guessing, but this is me. It could be sooner if we can get these trials going faster and get the drugs in faster. And that would be a miracle because I'd like to get together with my family. So we're all separated.
So many people have been bashing the United States for losing our status, I guess, in the world. But this is going to show, hopefully, let's see, if this can show when we put our minds together, like we have the smartest people in the world working on these kind of things
100%.
Now, right?
100%.
So let's see what happens there. Thank you very much, Dr. Hazan, for coming on. If people want to reach out to you, how do they do that?
Well, I guess right now I'm writing 3 protocols, so don't disturb me.
So don't disturb her. Follow her on Facebook.
Even the monitors, don't disturb me. Remove the emails because I am 800 emails behind. LinkedIn is really my portal. Twitter, Sabine Hazan, MD, is fine. But
you're
that's
huge on Twitter too.
I don't know about huge. I'm no Kim Kardashian or I'm huge in the medical world because my colleagues and I collaborate, and I love my doctors, and I wish them well. And I came up with a slogan, which is, in a war against viruses, the doctors are the soldiers.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that.
Yeah.
So we need to be smarter at this, because when we're starting, with viruses and bugs, doctors need to be, in the team. The scientists need to be in the team and clued in, and politicians need to have, access to all those doctors and scientists. And right now, the government's doing a great job. These are not easy times. Yep. And I thank them for getting the test supplies more. I thank them for getting more masks. I thank them for getting us, the Plaquenil. Please get it to the doctors, get it to the community hospitals. Yeah. The tertiary centers are equipped. The community hospitals are not. So that's it. That's my word.
Clinical research industry, your prediction going forward, because this week, I'm still seeing tons of feasibility surveys for new studies that they're probably planning to start June, July, right when you're saying you hope we recover.
I think the clinical trial industry is going to be fine, because this is an awakening to pharmaceutical companies, to the world, that we need to start producing in America, so we're not dependent on other countries like India and China. For example, those 2 drugs, that Plaquenil we need is actually made in India and made in China. So now those masks are made in India and China.
That's right.
We need to start fabricating in-house in America. This is the priority. We need to also start testing everything, from the vitamin C you're taking to the probiotic that is a bacteria. We need to start having more oversights. I know people don't like the FDA. However, I love the FDA, because I know that anything that is marked by the FDA and is oversight is safe to some point. It's definitely better than something that has not been tested. So I'm very big on testing. I'm very big on clinical data. I think, this is what I do. So I think I think we need to start putting more money into research and development. We cannot ignore this. This is the future. This is our reality. The virus is not going to just disappear. It could mutate. It could come back. So we need to start putting money into research to understand that. It's very difficult, especially for scientists to kind of real scientists. I'm always shocked at venture capitalists that are spending money on a drink with probiotics and investing 13 million on that, but they're not investing on a company that's basically trying to find a new cure for Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or
Right.
autism. And these are the things that I think we need to start pushing people and our venture capitalists that are, and the investors to basically say, start investing in things that matter, that changes the lives of people. Autism, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. Those are the diseases that are extremely difficult for people. So I think
Oncology,
clinical
yeah,
trials,
yeah.
oncology, I think I think that's my message. I think we need to be more alert,
Hmm.
less criticizing. And then the last message I'm going to put is, we need to look at each other and unify as the world. Like research has a unity with ICH-GCP where, it's a harmonization of all the countries to do research. Maybe the political world needs to take on that same attitude of union. Be a unity together. Bring on love, not hate. The one thing with this virus we're going to find out is if you bring in probably good bacteria in your gut, you could probably fight it on your own without the drugs to kill it. So let's not focus on killing. Let's focus on building and healing. So, there's those who heal and those who build and those who destroy. The destructors probably should need to be more builders. And so that's my message. I think we need to bring in more unity and more love and in this time kind of all pray that we all get out of this fine.
Me too. Thank you very much, Dr. Hazan. Thank you, everybody, for watching, listening, and we'll catch you all later. Bye bye.